Welcome to another episode of On the History Trail. I'm your host and tour guide, Mark Nonestied. Today we are in Spotswood at St. Peter's Episcopal Church in this wonderful building that's celebrating its 250th birthday. We're going to get a chance to explore the history of this church. We're going to meet with Sally Runyon, the chair of the 250th Anniversary Committee. We're going to talk with Father Charles. We're also going to take a look at some wonderful artifacts that were discovered while they were researching the history of the church. So sit back and relax and follow me as we journey down the history trail. Father Charles, thank you for having us here. 250th birthday, it's quite an event.
Isn't it? It's incredible,
Yes.
isn't it? Absolutely incredible.
Can you tell me about the early history of the church? So we're going back to 1756. What's the early history of the...
1756, of course, this is still the Church of England in the colonies. And all of our bishops and everyone came from England.
Great.
And so it was up until the Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
That's when the change takes place.
Okay, so historically it's an Anglican church.
Absolutely, and we still are connected to the Anglican Communion.
Okay.
The Episcopal Church is one of the churches that is part of the worldwide Anglican Communion.
Okay. Okay. So there were some big decisions then to be made during the Revolutionary War. This was a Church of England. And
That's
here
right.
we have a conflict with England during the Revolutionary War, and people had to make decisions. After the war, how is this where the Episcopal Church comes into being?
Absolutely. I mean, historically, the Episcopal Church had to come into being, if you will, by itself. And so that meant forming our own constitution, mm-hmm. and also it meant consecrating our own bishops.
Okay.
And Samuel Seabury was the first bishop who was consecrated for the Episcopal Church. Because without a bishop, there couldn't be ordinations of priests to serve these different parishes. And in New Jersey, of course, there are many different parishes that go back to the colonial times.
Okay. What parish was this church part of?
Actually, this church was originally connected to St. Peter's in Freehold. Mm-hmm. We were like joined, and also this particular parish helped to found the Trinity Parish in South River.
Oh, okay.
So and it's amazing, you know, the priests used to, they would serve these several parishes, and they would come on horseback, and when you think about what they did, it's quite an endeavor.
Mm. So they're itinerant ministers then, traveling
Absolutely,
around to
yeah.
a number of different congregations.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the main difference then between the Anglican Church and then the Episcopal Church?
Well, early on,
mm-hmm.
it would have been the king.
Okay.
And I mean, this property, of course, was deeded by King George III.
Okay.
To when it was founded. And then after the Revolution, the church had to regroup under a new constitution.
The present structure that's here, when was that built? When was this church built?
This particular building, I believe, goes back to the 1850s.
Okay,
I believe.
1850s. Okay, it looks like a wonderful Gothic revival style, popular at that time.
Yeah, in fact, it's this particular, you can find photographs of this particular church mm-hmm. in the book called New Jersey Churchscape. Ah, okay. Which is a photographic directory of churches within New Jersey.
Great, great. And I was reading too about there were changes as the church has evolved over the years. Changes to the late 1800s. There were some changes made, like the stained glass windows being placed in at that time.
That's correct. Yeah.
And the organ, do you know when that was How do
Well,
you...
the organ, it's a movable organ. It's gone from over there to over here. It's going to soon come back over here, and but this whole area of the sanctuary has gone through different changes. This part of the church was enlarged in the I believe it was in the late 1800s. And so little by little, what happened as this community was able to afford to do more things, we did them.
How large is the membership?
The membership here it's around 400 members. On a given Sunday, we have 2 worship services. We celebrate the Holy Eucharist at 8 o'clock and at 10 o'clock. And we have a great Sunday school program. We have close to 90 kids, and it's interesting. It's a really old place, all right? We have a lot of young families, and it's wonderful.
Great. And what do you find the most enjoyable about your service here?
I enjoy the most enjoyable. I enjoy Sunday when the community gathers. That is great. I mean, when I come out here, I look out, see all those faces. It just renews my own faith, and also the sense of outreach that is a part of this community. It has always been a part of this community, and we do a lot with feeding people who are hungry, and it's a really, but that sense of outreach through our thrift shop here, helping people who can't afford to buy a lot of things, that make it available to them at very low prices.
Great.
That's another great aspect of this community.
Right. And I know you have a great website that details a lot of this information.
Yeah.
www.stpetersspotswood.org.
That's right.
And has the history of the church and a lot of the outreach components that you mentioned, and people can certainly go there to find more information. I know in the collection there are 2 important books dating back to the 1700s that were donated by the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel. Can you tell me a bit about this 18th century society?
That was a society from England. It still exists, by the way.
Oh, okay.
and they were very instrumental in the founding of these churches. For example, you'll find amongst our artifacts, I guess, an old Bible and a Book of Common Prayer that was given to us, because churches that began didn't have a lot of things that were necessary to conduct the worship of the church. And in the Anglican Church and the Episcopal Church, and that entire ethos, if you will, the Book of Common Prayer. Note the name of that, the Book of Common Prayer. Was very important to the Episcopal Church and the Anglican tradition, because what that says is this prayer it belongs to all of us, and so we are very much a people of the book, the Bible and the Book of Common Prayer.
Right, and these 2 books that were donated in the 1700s still exist. You still have them.
Yes, we still have them. We got a lot of stuff here.
Great. And can we take a look at them?
Sure.
Good. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Let's do that then.
Okay.
So, Father Charles, these are the books that the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel donated.
That's correct.
Here in the 1760s. The first one we have here is the...
This is the Bible. Okay, it's opened here to the New Testament.
Okay.
And of course, this would be used in our worship services. And very much the tradition at that time would be to have services of what would be called morning prayer on a Sunday, which today would be called your ministry of the Word. Okay. Then once a month there would be the celebration of Holy Communion. Now, with the priests, a lot of these itinerant preachers coming along, when we didn't have a resident priest, I would imagine they would have had Holy Eucharist every time that they came, and that would have been taken, the ritual would have been taken from the Book of Common Prayer, and this is the book that was given to us by the Society.
Great.
And as you can see on it, reads the Book of Common Prayer and Administration of the Sacraments and the Rites and Ceremonies of the Church. The worship of the Church, the liturgy of the Church was central to the life of the Anglican Church and of the Episcopal Church, central to it. And so that's what makes that book so important.
Great. And both of them are from the 1760s. You can see this one's dated 1764.
Yes.
Both printed, one in London and the other printed by Joseph Betham, printer to the University of Cambridge. and they're just such wonderful books. I'm going to just gently pick up the cover here, which is detached, but it gives us the opportunity to examine it. We can see handwritten on one of the first pages, I guess by somebody within the Society, donating the book to the St. Peter's Church at Spotswood. And the cover, if we just turn it over, it's a leather cover. It's a leather covering on board, and we can see the board coming through here on the corners where the leather has worn off. And it's sewn together. We can see the sewing. These are what they call signatures, these various sections that are sewn together. And then they're sewn onto, and we can see here what are called raised cords. So these are cords that are on the spine of the book that would have went right into the cover of the board, and then the signatures are then hand sewn right onto that raised cord there. They're phenomenal books and such a wonderful local connection, and I'm sure you're pleased and happy that they still exist here.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We're just so fortunate to have these remnants, I guess, of early life here at St. Peter's.
Well, thank you for sharing them with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Sally Runyon, you're the chairperson of the 250th Anniversary Committee, which the church celebrated in 2006. Can you tell me some of the planning that went into the Anniversary Committee?
Certainly. We decided that we wanted to celebrate our 250th anniversary in a year-long celebration, having various events from time to time to let people know more about St. Peter's and also to have a good time and celebrate the fact that we've been here for so very long. Not too many churches make it to 250 years anymore, so we thought it was a very special event. So we sat down to plan what it was that we would do, and the particular things we really wanted to commemorate were the Eucharist. And we did Eucharist in varying styles every 100 years to follow the progress of the service and the church itself.
Okay, so the earliest date that you reenacted was what?
1756.
1756. And can you tell me what that was like?
That was very interesting. To begin with, it required quite a few members to wear wigs, including our priest, Father Charles. So that took a little bit of coercion to make people wear wigs in this day and age. But they did, and they were all good sports. We followed the original service from that day, which is written in Old English, which also required some practice.
So you had to do some research then in order to find out.
Absolutely did some research, yes.
And how did you conduct that? What sort of material did you look at to determine how they did things 250 years ago?
Well, there are old annals from the Episcopal Church that show all the old services and how they were conducted. So we went back and researched that and really made very few changes to adapt it to today.
And so 1856, you did one also. So tell me a little bit about that one.
That one was a lot easier in terms of preparation and dress. But
no wigs?
No wigs this time, but lots of long skirts and hats and things like that. We were escorted into church by a Civil War recreation militia that brought us in with flags and the American flag and the flags of the state.
And you also did similar research, looked at material from the mid-1800s to determine how things
And
would progress.
that service actually was a lot more similar to the service that we do today, so that was a bit easier.
But yet different than the one from 1756? Okay.
Yes, much different.
Okay. And I read that in September, and I found this interesting, you did one in the style of 1976.
Right.
Tell me about that.
That one was really easy. We used a prayer book that is not that far out of date, so it was really a lot more casual. And we combined that in with our annual parish picnic, so it was a lot looser.
So people got dressed up in their clothes from the 1970s?
We did. Some people were actually
deep
able
into the closet.
Yes, they found their old tie-dye shirts and their bell-bottom pants, so it was, it was interesting.
Great. Did you receive much press coverage for those events? I remember reading about it in the newspaper.
We did. We received, thankfully, a lot of press, and what that brought was a lot of people to the community to learn about St. Peter's.
Great.
And as a result, we have had several families join our congregation, so that's a nice thing.
Good, wonderful, wonderful. I also read that you participated in the Memorial Day parade, that you had a float in the parade.
Oh, we did.
Yeah.
We had an enormous float. It was a replica of St. Peter's. On the float were our priest and several other people. They had music, and we ended up winning first place.
Oh, great. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And in October, there were cemetery tours of the grounds. How did that go?
Well, originally, it was a very stormy day, as one might start their old Gothic novel. So we had to postpone them and do them on the next day. Actually, we had close to 200 people come on the tours. They were absolutely wonderful. We had reenactors of some of the more prominent graves in the cemetery, and they told the story of who was buried in the grave and somewhat about them, and we managed to work in a lot of the history of Spotswood and St. Peter's.
Great. So these were historical reenactors in period costumes giving a first-person narration.
Yes, they were.
Great, great. What was your favorite event?
What was my favorite event?
Tell me what your favorite event was. What did you enjoy the most?
I think I enjoyed the Eucharist the most. It was interesting to go back in time. It was interesting to wear the period costumes and just see how people react to how much has changed within the service.
Great, great. So 1756, 1856, or 1976? Which one?
Oh, I'd have to go with the 1756. The wigs were really priceless. Got some great shots of that.
Great. And I also understand in the course of doing research that you found some interesting items sort of tucked away in the nooks and crannies of the buildings.
We did. We found some, particularly in old ledgers and papers and letters and vestry minutes. Some of the more interesting ones were the pew rentals, where they used to, in the old days, rent the pew, and that's how the church got money into the church. But it was very much of a dividing factor, because if you rented a pew, you came in and you could sit in that pew. If you didn't have the money to rent a pew, you had to sit in the back. So everybody knew who had money and who didn't have money. And pew rentals ran about $2 a year, $3 a year, which was a dear sum in those days.
Yeah, yeah. And can we get an opportunity to take a look at these items?
Sure, we have some here.
Great. Sally, these are the items that were discovered.
Some of them, yeah.
Yeah, and some of the different nooks and crannies
yes,
around.
Yes, very much so.
So let's take a look at some of this material.
Okay.
We have an item here dated December 21st, 1812, and it looks like it's a receipt for a bill to pay the rector. And what's the price that we have?
It's $394.43, which was his annual salary. And I'm sure he was very glad to get it, because there were many years when they couldn't pay the rector. So actually writing out a receipt means he received the funds.
Certainly a sizable sum for 1812.
Very much so.
Yeah. One of the ways they raised money is, and I guess we have a perfect example of this, is this next item. What do we have here?
This is a diagram of the pews that were actually rented. This is 1855 to 1856, and what they did was rent the pews, and whatever monies people gave in for renting the pews was actually part of how the church ran, and it was their biggest revenue source. Here we have a document of collection of pew rentals, all handwritten, $20, $3, It depended where the pew was.
So where's
how
the
much
most expensive?
The most expensive actually is the first row.
Right up front.
Because people like to sit right up front. So through the collection of the pew rentals was a large, as I said, a large revenue source. And when that went away, then they had to come up with different other ways to collect the revenue. But the idea of having the pew rentals go away created a freer church.
Do you know when that was done?
That was done, I know who did it. Augustine Cornell did it in the 1800s.
Okay.
And late 1800s.
Okay.
And he decided he didn't like the idea of there being poor people in the back of the church and only those who could afford the pews in the front.
And of course, these numbers here correspond to the church pews.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, great, and the numbers on the map. There's a wonderful letter here, which we found, right, from 1900.
Right.
We were going through earlier. And complaining about the children playing in the church graveyard, playing marbles, and destroying flowers, and defacing the graves in the churchyard. And this is from what year is this?
This is 1900, and the vestry is requesting that the children not loiter in the graveyard. We're not quite sure who Mr. Johnson was in Spotswood, but we're sort of assuming he must have been overseeing the schools.
Okay.
And that would be the way they got the message out. We actually could write this letter today because we still have, not playing marbles, but they do enjoy playing in the cemetery.
Great, and you also found photographs too. And there's some photographs of these past members of the congregation.
Well, this is the Hewletts, which were a very prominent couple in town.
Okay.
But we have some other photographs of the Spotswood. I don't know if you can see these. The Spotswood Dam, which is DeVoe Lake.
And this looks like a color postcard of the church.
And this is undated. We're not quite sure where this comes from. We can only tell by the growth of the foliage that it's an older picture. This is a picture of the church after the fire in 1928 that broke out on Good Friday as a result of a squirrel eating through the wires and did a great deal of destruction to the church. This is Birchall School, which many people in Spotswood would remember because a lot of our actual today congregants went there.
Great, great. And we noticed some of the letterhead that items were written on. This is a treasurer's receipt?
This is a treasurer's report to the vestry, and it's written on the letterhead of Isaac DeVoe and Son, which was the snuff factory that we talked about previously.
Right.
So, and he was obviously a member of the vestry of St. Peter's and gave in his reports on his own stationery. And you can tell that this is quite old because they're still spelling Spotswood with two T's.
With two T's, okay. Great. And there was this document which we were taking a little look at earlier and sort of perplexed about.
Yeah, we're not really quite sure what this is. It's a listing of something.
Right, certainly a listing on one side, but what I found intriguing about it is if we flip it around, the other side, they wrote this list on the back of letterhead to the Old Bridge Enameled Brick and Tile Company, which was a large factory that was located on Main Street in the Old Bridge section, just as you cross over into Sayreville. It was an operation from the 1890s to 1927. The superintendent was William E. Rivers, whose name is right at the top of the letterhead, and he's buried at Chestnut Hill Cemetery off the Old Bridge Turnpike in East Brunswick.
Well, once again, we can see the name Hazelhurst, who was a member of St. Peter's, who was the secretary and treasurer. And I guess that's how the stationery ended up in our archives. Yeah,
he just took some home from work then. Sally, there's some wonderful stained glass memorial windows here in the church, and we're standing in front of one that's in memory of Mary DeVoe, who was born in 1845 and died in 1908. And I understand the DeVoe family were prominent members of the church. Can you tell me a little bit about them?
They were very prominent members of the church and of the community of Spotswood. Isaac DeVoe started the snuff factory in Spotswood that was in direct competition to the Helm snuff mill that's in
And I
Jamesburg.
understand that's a factory that was located not that far from the church.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well, the snuff mill took advantage of DeVoe Lake.
Okay.
It wasn't actually called DeVoe Lake at that time, but they harnessed their power from the water in the lake.
Okay, so these were water-operated mills.
Yes,
Okay.
and there were grist mills here. There were other kinds of mills also that used the water in the lake.
Great.
Isaac ran the snuff mill for quite a few years, and then his son Augustus DeVoe took over the running of the snuff mill. They were all members of St. Peter's and worshipped here for many, many years and helped to run the church. So the DeVoes within the town became very prominent. They were elected to the council, and there were a couple of mayors. And in the end result, DeVoe Avenue, which is a pretty busy street here in Spotswood, was named after the DeVoes. And DeVoe Avenue was also the primary route down to the Jersey Shore in the 1800s when people would take their horse and buggies, and it was a dirt road, and they would take it on down to the shore.
Oh, great, great. So when Mary DeVoe died in 1908, presumably the family raised money and purchased this window in her honor. And there's a number of these memorial windows throughout the church. And this one's interesting because it has the name of the company on the lower side of it that we were looking at. And it says, made in Great Britain by J. Whipple and Company, Ltd. And it's a great stained glass window, and if we take a look at the different parts of it, we can see this is called lead caming. It's a pliable material that's used to frame out the different pieces of glass, and in order to support the weight of the window, all this glass that's sort of coming down, they have these reinforcing rods that are spanning between the window frame, and they tie off with this copper wiring. We can see that right there. They tie off to the lead caming, and that helps support the weight of the stained glass. One of the common problems with old stained glass windows is that sometimes they have a tendency to buckle on the lower portion from all the weight coming down, because many times these wires give out and are not supporting the weight anymore. But there are some wonderful stained glass windows here. An earlier one from the 1890s is also located in the church. Thank you for sharing this material, and I wanted to give you a little gift, a thank you for having us here and showing us and taking us around. This is a copy of an atlas from 1876.
My goodness.
And it shows St. Peter's Church and Rectory. And there's the rectory, the graveyard, this wonderful carriage right out front, and there's the church in the background. And you can add this to your
wonderful?
archives. And thank you. And hopefully you'll invite us back and we can explore more of the history of this church and the old rectory and some of the other buildings, and of course the great graveyard that's around the church. Thank you, Sally.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us. And please join me again as we travel on the History Trail.